The top story, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken appreciates humanitarian activities of Ethiopia. Greetings, dear viewers, ladies and gentlemen. This is Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Shifarao Laka. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has announced more than $330 million in new humanitarian assistance for Ethiopia in fiscal year 2023 through the Department of State and the U.S. Agency for International Development. He said the funding will provide life-saving support to those displaced and affected by conflict, drought, and food insecurity in Ethiopia. This assistance includes $12 million through the State Department Bureau of Population, Refugees and Migration, and more than $319 million through the U.S. Agency for International Development. This brings the total U.S. humanitarian assistance for the response to the region to more than $780 million in fiscal year 2023. The assistance provides critical life-saving support, including food, shelter, safe drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene, among other key services. This announcement will help deepen the partnership between the United States and Africa, Blinken said. Moving on, Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister of Ethiopia, Demeke Mekonnen, met with the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and discussed a wide range of matters spanning from the implementation of the cessation of hostilities agreement to Ethiopia's economic, sanitation, and regional peace and security issues. Spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Meles Alam, said the two sides remarked on the positive development of the cessation of hostilities and the AU-led disarmament, demobilization, and rehabilitation processes, and the work of the Ethiopian Rehabilitation Commission. In connection with that, Ambassador Meles said the two parties discussed the formation of the interim regional administration in the Tigray region and the ongoing nationwide consultations on transitional justice policy that will bring about accountability and redress for victims. And now moving to our trending stories, ladies and gentlemen, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has appreciated the significant humanitarian activity of Ethiopia following the signed peace agreement in Pretoria. And briefing journalists yesterday at the Addis Ababa University, Blinken said the U.S. government is committed to extending humanitarian supports to Ethiopia in war-torn regions. And our staff reporter, Binyam Alamayu, has attended the briefing, and he is here with me. Thank you so much, Binyam, for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So what are some of the things that you observed in the press briefing that Antony Blinken gave?
Okay, thanks again, Shife. So the biggest announcement yesterday from Secretary Blinken was that there has been a provision of a sum of $331 million US dollars for humanitarian efforts, particularly in the three war-torn regions of Amhara, Afar, and Tigray. Other than that, the Secretary underlined the importance of Africa in his visit. This is Ethiopia, as it happens, is a second stopover next to Niger.
Right.
And so he reiterated how important Ethiopia has been. Ethiopia was and still is the biggest recipient of U.S. aid in Africa, and the second most populous nation, which is also located in a strategically and geopolitically very important part of the continent. And so the U.S. still upholds its interest in Ethiopia. And so he took time to appreciate the efforts made by all parties, the TPLF, the government, and other parties involved in the 2-year war, to bring about rehabilitation, the provision of services in Tigray and other parts of Ethiopia following the war, and the cessation of hostilities agreement, which he said is moving in the right direction. Although there still are numerous efforts being expected from all parties. He also underlined the importance of providing a safe, comprehensive, and inclusive national dialogue effort and also the need to instill in the society a transitional justice, which he said is of paramount importance. Exactly. And the U.S. supports these efforts, which he hopes to be finalized in the near future. And all parties and all people affected by the war have a safe moving on to a second or a much different form of life in the peace agreement provided next to Pretoria. Exactly. So these were some of the things he highlighted during the press briefing yesterday.
So definitely this historic visit will beef up the bilateral ties between Ethiopia and the United States of America. Binyam, thanks a lot for that update.
Yes, okay, thanks.
The viewers, we stay on this historic visit of Antony Blinken, and moving on, the United States has launched a $331 million joint emergency operation to be implemented over 5 years in Ethiopia. And the new investment, named Joint Emergency Operation, was announced yesterday in the presence of U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Johannes Fontaine has produced the following story.
The United States has announced a $331 million US program for humanitarian assistance to citizens who are in need in Ethiopia. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who is on an official visit to Ethiopia, announced the emergency operation, which will last for 5 years and will be implemented by U.S. aid. While announcing the program, Blinken stated that U.S. is providing various support to Ethiopia and informed the support will be used for people in need of humanitarian assistance in 9 of the 11 regions of Ethiopia.
Today, I can share that we're going to be providing an additional $331 million in assistance through this Joint Emergency Operations Program to try to reach more people in Ethiopia who are in need of food security, and we think we'll reach another 13 million or so people being affected by drought in particular. Besides being enduring, what's so important is that it's intended for everyone in Ethiopia.
The Secretary of State added that in addition to the urgent support, the United States will support Ethiopia's effort to alleviate food insecurity by maximizing productivity.
As vital, as necessary, as urgent as this assistance is, we're equally committed to working closely with our partners in Ethiopia to help them develop and strengthen their own productive capacity. That ultimately is the most important thing that we can do, because I'm convinced, we're convinced, that in Ethiopia and many other partner countries in Africa, it's that long-term productive capacity that can be resilient to things like droughts, like climate change, like disease.
Minister of Finance Ahmed Shide, for his part, reminded that Ethiopia and the United States have a strong bilateral relations spanning centuries, and thanked the people and government of the United States for their coordinated support to Ethiopia.
Today, on the occasion of the launch of this USAID's new 5-year Joint Emergency Operation Program in the presence of Your Excellency, we would like to share our deep gratitude to the United States government and the American people for their continued commitment in supporting our countries address the urgent humanitarian challenges which affected the most vulnerable. I acknowledge and sincerely appreciate that in 2022 alone, the U.S. provided more than $1.7 billion to respond to humanitarian needs driven by the crisis in the northern Ethiopia and the severe drought in pastoral areas in southern and southeastern Ethiopia.
Ahmed Shide added, despite challenging factors, Ethiopia has devised various strategies to get rid of the problems it is facing and achieving progress, and the U.S. support will help Ethiopia to achieve its plan quickly.
And moving on, Executive Secretary of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, Workana Gabayo, has conferred in Addis Ababa with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Their discussion, according to Workana's post on Twitter, focused on the issues pertaining to IGAD's essential role in regional peace and security architecture. He confirmed that the two officials pledged to continue enhancing the IGAD-U.S. strategic partnership. Welcome back. You're still watching Addis News Hour. Moving to other stories, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has congratulated President Xi Jinping on his re-election as the President of the People's Republic of China for the third term. Prime Minister Abiy, in his letter, reiterated his firm commitment to further strengthening the existing bilateral, comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership between the two friendly countries. Ethiopian Airlines has commenced a weekly freighter service from Copenhagen to Addis Ababa effective the 12th of March 2023 with its B767-300F aircraft, which has a capacity of 45 tons of cargo per flight. The new route will play an important role in boosting trade between Europe and the rest of the world, according to Ethiopian. Ethiopian also plans to launch 5 weekly passenger service to Copenhagen starting from May 2023, which will boost its cargo capacity using the belly hold of its passenger aircraft. Meanwhile, Ethiopian Airlines will resume direct flights to Singapore on March 25, 2023. The flight will be operated 4 times a week within the ultra-modern B787 Dreamliner, the airline said. The Acting Secretary General of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, Antonio Pedro, says Africa needs to maximize poverty to ensure the required drastic transformation on the continent. The 55th United Nations Economic Commission for Africa Ministerial Conference of Finance, Planning and Economic Development Professionals Committee kicked off in Addis Ababa yesterday. Kasaun Chani has the following story.
The 55th United Nations Economic Commission for Africa Ministerial Conference of Finance, Planning and Economic Development Professionals Committee, COM 2023, kicked off in Addis Ababa. Speaking on the occasion, the Acting Secretary General of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, Antonio Pedro, said over 100 million Africans live in extreme poverty and cited both natural and man-made complications.
Africa currently leads in global poverty. The continent is home to more than half of the world's poor, 58.8% in 2022 to be precise, overtaking South Asia, which has about 37.6%. In the wake of COVID-19 outbreak, 62 million people were pushed into poverty in just 1 year, with an additional 8 million estimated to have joined their ranks by the end of 2022. As many as 149 million non-poor, or about 10% of Africa's population, remain at high risk of falling into poverty. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, all in all, 695 million people in Africa are either poor or face the risk of falling into poverty.
The week-long session has started its discussion under the theme Fostering Recovery and Transformation in Africa to Reduce Inequalities and Vulnerabilities. The discussion aims to renew attention and action on eliminating poverty, inequality, and assessing regional integration efforts and other conditions. The State Minister Planning and Development, Namara Gabeyo, for his part said, maximizing cooperation is vital to contain the increment of poverty and inequalities that are serious problems in Africa.
2022 was a particularly difficult year, and mostly due to multiple and overlapping shocks and risks. As a result, an array of development challenges has arisen across the continent, among others, the inflation and the rising cost of living, household poverty, food insecurity, energy insecurity, and social instability. Failing to address these issues would likely to hamper poverty reduction, recovery from recent shocks, and building resilience for the achievement of both Agenda 2030 and 2063.
African Ministers of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, representatives of member states, United Nations offices, Pan-African financial institutions, African academic and research institutions, and development partners, among others, are attending the meeting.
The State Minister for Foreign Affairs, Misgano Arga, says Ethiopia is committed to executing and carrying out its promises in implementing the UNFPA's intervention areas. The State Minister held discussion with the Regional Director of the United Nations Population Fund for Eastern and Southern Africa region, Lydia Zigomo. The Regional Director, for her part, appreciated the support of Ethiopian government along with UNFPA throughout the years. And now in business, a well-known economist says Ethiopia should provide more benefits packages to investors to earn foreign currency. The economist, Medina Negato, says the success of wheat production needs to be replicated in other production items in the agri-sector. Kushumal Sawaz, more on that.
Prioritized 5 major sectors, namely mining, agriculture, tourism, manufacturing and ICT in its 10-year perspective strategic plan to attract FDI. According to UNCTAD, Ethiopia is the one among the 5 largest FDI recipients in Africa. The International Monetary Fund report revealed that Ethiopia has ranked the 3rd largest economy in sub-Saharan region. However, due to the past conflict in northern Ethiopia and the COVID-19 pandemic, the FDI magnetism has declined by 6% compared to the previous years. Talking to ETV, Zamadin Nagato said Ethiopia should implement preferred benefit packages to investors in a bid to earn more foreign currency.
By making a lot of reforms in that sector, by incentivizing, for example, artisanal miners and other types of incentives, or inviting big mining companies into the gold, tantalum, potash, and all these other things I think Ethiopia has, and then gas. Recently there was news item, it's certified that Ethiopia has about 7 trillion cubic feet of gas. Okay, that's pretty significant. It's monetizable.
Zamadine underlined that the success of wheat production needs to be replicated in any other production items in agriculture sector to ensure domestic food demands as well as neighboring countries.
You replicate the success of wheat in other agriculture sectors, okay? Ethiopia actually can export and address the food security needs of these countries, of these neighboring countries, which are pretty close to Ethiopia. So when we think of agriculture, we need to think broader in the sense that it can go beyond local consumption, and it could be actually a very significant export generator for Ethiopia. And that's where I think investors can also be engaged, because they earn hard currency, they address some of the food security. I mean, in the Gulf they have plenty of petrodollars, but there's very little they can do about farming the desert.
He also suggested that Ethiopia needs to exploit its untapped tourism potential to create more job opportunities as well as to secure foreign currency.
I think will be a major exciting sector. Now lots of hotels infrastructure has been built. So I think tourism can also, because it generates not only hard currency, but it can generate millions of jobs. And so it has the potential, because there's a lot of countries in Africa who don't even have an airline and have bigger tourist numbers than Ethiopia. So with a coordinated effort, with a strategy focused on promoting that, as is being done now, I think the tourism sector could actually generate jobs and foreign exchange. And for investors, there's a lot of opportunity in that area.
According to Investment Commission, Ethiopia garnered $2.4 billion USD in 9 months.
I just want to tell you guys, Akwaba, Karibu, welcome to Ghana!
My name is Princess Umu Hatia. I am the globe-trotting princess and author. Welcome to my city, Accra. Accra is the capital of Ghana. Now today I'm taking you on a tour to various places in the city. We're currently at the Independence Square in Accra. Now the Independence Square is the second largest square in the world after Tiananmen Square. Accra has about 4 million people. Accra is a major economic trading hub of Ghana. We're in Makola Market. Makola Market is the second largest market in West Africa. This is where I come to buy all my fabrics, food stuff. It's a busy, bustly place. It's a lovely place to come. So if you want to get any souvenirs, Makola Market is the place to come. Now come on with me.
Akwaba, Akwaba, oh sister, I know be your brider. Give me one chance, I can be a fighter.
And now in our continental news coverage, a long-lasting cyclone that is refusing to dissipate has torn through Malawi and Mozambique, killing hundreds of people and leaving many others either injured or missing. Tigstanisa has the following story from Reuters.
Southern Malawi have been battered by Tropical Storm Freddy, with 225 people killed and 22,000 displaced. Rescuers have been using shovels to find survivors buried in mud. Malawi's city of Blantyre have been worst affected, with many people, including children, dying in landslide in the hill city. Some homes have been crumpled into floodwaters, while others have been entirely swept away. This is one of the most powerful storms ever recorded in the southern hemisphere, have mounted into the hundreds in Malawi, the government said on Tuesday. After Cyclone Freddy ripped through southern Africa for the second time in a month, the district around the commercial hub of the Blantyre was one of the hardest hit. Severe flooding and rain damaged roads and bridges, hampering rescue efforts to Blantyre. Mud poured into home residents.
A child was trapped up to her head in the mud. She was crying for help. Even though the water was very strong, we managed to cross and rescue her. It was very difficult, but we managed to pull her out.
The government has declared a state of disaster in 10 districts that have been hardest hit by the storm. The collapse of roads and bridges have hampered rescue operations, while helicopters have had difficulty flying because of the heavy rains and strong winds, although these have now eased. Freddy has also left a trail of destruction in Mozambique, where it made landfall over the weekend. Over 200 has been dead, and more than 22,000 people there were seeking shelter away from their homes as heavy rains continued to pummel Malawi. More than 500 people have been injured, and scores are missing, according to the Department of Disaster Management Affairs. Mudslides have made it difficult to get relief to those affected. Freddy could sweep through Mozambique, Zambezia province, again bringing more wind and rain.
Well, dear viewers, with that, we come to the end of today's news. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye-bye.